All right. So, Mr. Karahalios, thank you so much for taking this interview today. So, excuse me. So, I wanted to cover four basic parts about the New Blue Party. I wanted to talk a little bit about your origins in politics, your experience with the Progressive Conservative Party before you and your wife Belinda left, and then I wanted to get into how you two went off making this party, and then getting into the nitty gritty. What will the New Blue Party bring to Ontario if elected in this election?
That's great, Josh. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for. Is this a paper for your master's program?
It's a feature article.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, thanks for devoting it to Queen's Park Party politics.
Yeah, no worries. All right, so I just wanted to start off with a bit of a warm-up question. But if you were to summarize the New Blue Party of Ontario in one sentence, what would it be? For those who may not know what the New Blue Party is.
So we're an anti-establishment, anti-cronyism, right of center political party in the province of Ontario, fighting for values and principles for Ontarians that have been shut out of the political process.
Okay. And so obviously you and your wife have been in politics for a long time. How did you two end up meeting? And how did you determine that you were destined to be in Ontario politics?
Well, I don't know if we determined we were destined. And you mentioned earlier in the intro that we left the Ontario PC party. We were actually kicked out. And I had been involved. I got involved in student politics in my undergrad at the University of Toronto when I was doing a Bachelor of Engineering. I eventually served as president of the Engineering Society at U of T. So that was kind of like my start when I was a little younger than you, I think. And I met my wife. Well, actually, when I went to law school, I got involved in partisan politics. I'd never really been involved in partisan politics in high school and in undergrad. And I guess I got a touch of politics in student politics. And then when I went to law school, I realized very quickly that I was not a far leftist progressive, which is the tone taken by most of the vocal professors and students at the law school I was at the time at the University of Ottawa. It was very eye-opening. So I got involved with Stephen Harper's Conservative Party, volunteering before his first election win in 2005, volunteered there and stayed involved in Conservative Party politics and Progressive Conservative Party politics, although they were kind of different parties, a lot of similar characters in the back, but they're different legal entities, and some overlap, some not. I met my wife, and she was aligned with me politically, but not, she'd get involved and volunteer at the local level. But eventually it became a family affair, a family conviction when I'm so involved, especially, helping out in campaigns. We used to live in Mississauga. We got involved there, helping our provincial and federal candidates. And then in Cambridge, involved locally on campaigns. And, we were just helping out together. So it's not like you pick the path. Sometimes others pick the path for you. And if you lead with your convictions, I wish you could say that in politics or in life, everything is scripted out and things end up the way, you would have scripted them, but I'm not really one to predict the future. We focus on living in the moment and doing the best we can every day. And this is where we are.
Yeah. So you mentioned briefly that you were a volunteer in the Harper years. What was the biggest takeaway that you had from that experience?
I think the biggest takeaway I will remember from getting involved and volunteering when the Harper Conservative Party of Canada won the first time was the disconnect between the establishment media and the establishment voices and people on the ground. So I remember clearly in 2005, I just remember articles in the constant barrage of Stephen Harper will never be prime minister, these types of values. And principles and propositions will never be accepted by Canadians. And he did win. And it was very appealing to Canadians, his first election and also his second. And to me, it just clarified the disconnect and how out of touch the establishment is, and the quote unquote voices we rely on to give us opinion and expert opinion on politics, or the news media likes to refer to them as experts. They're just totally out of touch with what's going on in the ground.
And obviously, before you entered politics, you were a lawyer, because you did mention that you went to the University of Ottawa. How long were you a practicing lawyer for?
So I still practice part-time. I've got my legal license in 2008. I took a brief break for a couple of years where I ran a small business and turned it around. And I still practice law. So I generally focus on corporate commercial and giving small businesses general legal advice. So I still practice now.
All right. So I just wanted to shift over to your experience with the Progressive Conservative Party. So how did you and Belinda first get involved with the PCs?
So kind of two different answers there. I got involved. You're making me go a while back there when I was a little younger. After the Conservative Party of Canada won in 2005, I started getting involved in the PCs, ran campaigns locally for candidates. I got involved in local riding associations where we were living. And at some point I started doing this campaign called Axe the Carbon Tax in 2017, 2016, after Patrick Brown won the PC leadership, and he flip-flopped on all his promises and betrayed the base of the PC party and blue voters in Ontario. And I just felt something had to be done about that. And people were really frustrated within the party with Patrick Brown. And the other thing that was occurring was nominations were being rigged in the PC party at the time. And a year after Axe the Carbon Tax started, or almost a year, a sister campaign was launched called Take Back Our PC Party, where we were fighting voter fraud in the Ontario PC party. And so that's where I first got, I guess, a public profile from my involvement in party politics. And, that led to the first instance where the PC operatives and the establishment of the PC party tried to destroy us. In late 2017, in November, they sued me and the Axe the Carbon Tax campaign, trying to basically bankrupt me. They applied the lawsuit because we were collecting signatures to call a special general meeting of the Ontario PC party to get Patrick to reverse his position on the carbon tax and to redo a bunch of nominations that where there were allegations of voter fraud. And a few of them were confirmed, like one was confirmed by Hamilton Police involving voter fraud. Another one in Ottawa, Senator Marjorie Le Breton at the time said voter fraud was involved. And others, there was pretty good evidence on the ground that voter fraud was involved. So instead of, allowing us to collect the rest of the signatures and calling a special general meeting, or maybe reconsidering his position on the carbon tax or other principled positions that he had abandoned, Brown and his team decided, and the PC higher ups decided it'd be a better idea to sue me. We won the court case in 6 weeks. Thankfully, in Ontario, we have something called anti-SLAPP legislation. So when a more powerful entity that has a lot more money at its disposal sues an individual based on their political opinions, there's a piece of legislation that's called a strategic litigation against public participation. Mm-hmm. And there's legislation in North America to help or not help so much as allow a case like that to be reviewed earlier. So instead of me getting stuck for 2 years in a lawsuit that would have drained my family's finances, our lawyers brought forward a motion to say to the judge, look, they've got no evidence. They've got no legal merit to their lawsuit. You should dismiss this before we go down the rabbit hole of, cross-examinations and hundreds of pages of documents. So we had a mini trial, is what I guess you would call it in layman terms. They were found to have no legal argument and no evidence to back up their claims, and we won. And shortly after that, Patrick Brown was pushed out by caucus as leader of the Ontario PC Party. But the caucus and the guys in the back of the PC Party didn't want the narrative to be, at the time I didn't realize what was going on, because some of the lobbyists in the back planted, some of the organizers, I should say, in the back planted these stories in CTV News of the kind of like the, what would you classify them, the sexual harassment allegations against Brown.
Yeah, so I know recently he was officially cleared and he's now running for conservative leader.
Right. So those stories were planted a couple of weeks after I won the court case, and caucus and the organizers in the back of the PC Party realized it's unsustainable to have this guy as leader. He just tried to sue one of our organizers who's leading the Axe the Carbon Tax campaign, who's against voter fraud. He used the PC Party and the access to taxpayer funding they have to bankrupt this guy, and he lost and he got humiliated in court. So they planted these stories of sexual harassment, which I guess CTV News has admitted they weren't accurate. But largely what ends up happening when they plant those stories, they get their wish, they get Patrick Brown out as leader, but they never address the voter fraud at nominations. They never address the fact that the PC Party's offside on things like the carbon tax. And that was their way of washing it over, right? Because if you did the principled thing and just said, we're removing Patrick Brown as leader, or we're calling a general meeting because he's offside on policy, because we have corruption in our party with the democratic process, because, there's reports of money being left at party headquarters in bags and going missing, whatever the media and the Globe and other news sources were writing at the time. If they did all that, they would have had to change things. And I realize now, years later, that they didn't really care. The operatives in the back didn't care, because that's just how they do business. And with Patrick Brown, it seems like they just got sloppy. And so that's the real reason why they planted those stories against Brown, because they didn't want him to be removed as leader on the basis of the Axe the Carbon Tax campaign and on voter fraud. We quickly went into a leadership. All the leadership candidates were basically cozying up to the message of Axe the Carbon Tax, take back our PC Party. Doug Ford won that. He was championing the Axe the Carbon Tax and leveraging the fact that he was Rob's brother. And that was, good messaging by Doug Ford for a few weeks there that he quickly abandoned after he became premier. But in Cambridge, we had a whole other side story that was connected to what I'm telling you about them going after us. In Cambridge, the PCs were trying in 2017 and 2018 to put in a candidate who lived in Alberta. So imagine that. The individual's primary residence was in Alberta, and she was trying to become the PC candidate in the riding of Cambridge, pretending that she lived in Cambridge. And the local PC riding association was vocal about it, but two of us at the time, me and an individual named Ron, he's since passed away, a very sad loss in my life. We were speaking out about it. And so the media quoted us in a couple articles saying this nomination can't go forward with this person from Alberta. So that was another motivation as to why the PC sued me, because the PC Cambridge Riding Association 2017 said, if you at headquarters go forward with this nomination, we're going to have to go to court because she can't be the candidate. And she's clearly in the lead, and she's cozying up to the leader, Brown. And she legally, if you live in another province, Josh, you can't run in Ontario politics at the provincial level.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah. So a lot of people, that is an actual law. It's not just a preference in terms of its.
Sorry to cut you off. This was actually confirmed that somebody who was residing in Alberta was trying to run in Cambridge as a PC Conservative.
Yeah, it's in the news. And in fact, her organizers that lived in Cambridge, the 2 or 3 people that were quote unquote backing her candidacy, eventually they quit, and they admitted that, they played the story like they didn't know. But the pressure got so hot against them that it was admitted publicly by her team that she didn't have residency in Ontario for 6 months. So the PCs didn't go forward with her as the candidate. And so fast forward now, and then months later, I get sued, and we go through the PC leadership, and And Doug is now the leader. And there's talk that the PCs, I get someone kind of connected to headquarters and operative calling me and saying, we're just going to appoint someone in Cambridge. And I said, are you nuts? Like, we just went through a year fighting against rigged nominations. And we just went through a leadership where Doug Ford and was saying, we can't have appointments. It's the grassroots and we got to have elections. And now you guys are coming out of the leadership a week later saying there's 20 ridings left, including Cambridge, and you're going to pick someone. You can't do that. And they said, no, we can. They don't really care that the PC Constitution says that you have to have a nomination. The media has totally misreported what the constitutions of the parties say sometimes, because they just take the word of whatever operatives in their ear. And, it's complicated stuff, so I don't blame them. It's not like they're deliberately doing it, but they're not canvassing enough opinions on it. So it was an outrage for Cambridge PCs that this rumor was going around. And my wife had hope with Doug Ford that the PCs were going to turn it around. And she said, someone's got to run locally. And she stepped up and said, I'm going to run. And the two individuals that were running were also interested in the race, didn't live in Cambridge at the time. The people the PCs were thinking of appointing weren't the individuals who'd been campaigning for a year and a half. So she put her name forward, and eventually they relented and did about a dozen nominations. And my wife won in 2 weeks. So that was really her, she just dived in head first. Prior to that, she'd always helped out on the ground. But I was, really involved because I got, you get involved in an axe to carbon tax campaign, you get really sucked into it because you want to see it succeed. But she decided she wanted to represent Cambridge PCs and Cambridge residents, and we needed an MPP who lived in the riding. She jumped in, she won the nomination in 2 weeks, and very, very hopeful that things were going to turn around. And later in 2018, after she won in Cambridge and Doug Ford became premier, the PCs rushed a convention, and I ran for party president because the thousands of supporters of Axe the Carbon Tax and Take Back Our PC Party were saying, this is our chance to fix the inner workings of the Ontario PC Party and fix the governance and wipe out all the cronyism and the vote rigging, make sure it never happens again. And by that point, November 2018, me and her were both fully in it. We were both immersed in it, became a family affair. And we were both right into it.
Yeah. And actually, it's good that you brought that up, because right after, during that presidential campaign for to be progressive conservative president, you actually ended up filing a lawsuit against the progressive conservatives for vote rigging. So what exactly happened in that situation? Because overall, you ended up coming in second to Brian Patterson, but you also filed this lawsuit that there was allegations of rigging. Can you go into more detail on that?
Yeah, I didn't end up second. They said I ended up in second. So the lawsuit was filed a year later after convention in, I think it was somewhere between September, October 2019. So the first time they sued me, they allowed me to run at a convention in 2018 for president. There were some of the operatives in the back that didn't want me to run, including the people behind Derek Sloan. Derek Sloan's future conservative riding president at the federal level was on the slate that was approved by Doug Ford, led by Brian Patterson. And there were others like the organization PAFE, which is a social conservative advocacy group that's controlled by PC operatives. They were plugging for my opponent, and that's fine. You get to pick whoever you want to support at a convention. And, they allowed me to run. And I did not think, I guess I was naive, but I did not think that they threw everything at me in the campaign in terms of little twists and turns and curveballs, and that's all fair game. It's kind of underhanded, but I wasn't squawking about it. The headquarters was working with Brian Patterson, my opponent. So we had delivered a mailer identifying the lobbyists that made up most of Brian Patterson's slate, because there's something like 20 positions on the PC executive, and Patterson put together with Ford's team an individual for every spot. So they were kind of ganging up on me and one or two others that were running together for president and a couple of the VP spots, but we weren't trying to do a takeover of the entire executive the way they were. So basically, they were trying to control the entire executive without any dissent. And, some of the stuff was breaking the rules, such as inviting Brian Patterson to a meeting to discuss that they weren't going to include my mailer in the convention package, but include his. That's clearly cheating. And they invite my opponent to the meeting to discuss that. And Patterson, my opponent, was all plugged into the convention organizing and in continuous conversation with their organizers. So they weren't keeping neutral. But the real nefariousness happens at convention. So I go into convention with, we're tracking our delegates and the voters. And we go into convention, and I think we were somewhere at 60% of delegates were for us. The remaining 40 were somewhere split, like 10 to 20% for Patterson and the rest undecided. So we were very confident going into convention. We go into the convention in November 2018 over the weekend, and there's a lot of smearing, whisper campaigning going on. Jim's an angry guy. Jim's this, Jim's that. Jim's wife should leave him. That was very eye-opening, and especially coming from people who pretended to support Axe the Carbon Tax and take back our PC party just because they had a vendetta against Brown. Now these same people are coming out against me at convention because the establishment, the staff at PC headquarters doesn't want me to be president. I thought it was a little disgusting, like, spreading the rumor that my wife should leave me, but especially coming from some people who pretend to uphold moral values. But I guess that's how politics works. So none of it was working. And by Saturday night or Saturday afternoon, I did my convention speech, and it went really well. Standing ovations. You can find it out on my YouTube channel, Jim Karahalios. And our support level just shot up Saturday afternoon, Saturday night. So now we went from like 60% ID'd support to, less than 15% of delegates are saying they're voting for Patterson. So we're feeling pretty good on Sunday, going into the vote Sunday morning, despite the fact that a lot of delegates are leaving because Sunday's family time or they're going to church. So we're losing some voters. But surely I'm thinking in my head there, I'm asking some of the individuals tangentially involved, and I had my scrutineers, and they were telling me that, no, it's all on the up and up. It's, we don't get a sniff of voter fraud occurring here. And Sunday morning, they rigged it. So Sunday morning, in arrives all these staffers for PC cabinet ministers and the premier's office, and some staffers from Ottawa working for some federal MPs. And they flood in on Sunday, and they're not on the delegate list.
And you've mentioned all this inside your lawsuit filed with the PC Conservatives.
Right. So the evidence is all there. The PCs won't file a defense. We're here now 2 years later, and they're plugging away, trying to do everything they can not to file a defense against this. So let me just get to the conclusion, because I know it's going to be a dragged on thing and you don't want to do a whole session on the legalities of voter fraud. There were more ballots counted than voters who voted. That's the premise. So right there, the thing is rigged, right? And the gap between the number of delegates that voted and the supposed margin of victory that they put forward was impossible. The other thing is, when we get into the voting room, there's no list of registered voters. They just have a printed list of thousands of people who paid to attend convention. And some of those are registered delegates and some of them are not. They're just people that showed up. And on that list are people who were delegates but didn't pay to attend convention. So, there were instances where the delegate cutoff is Saturday. There are instances where supporters of mine showed up on Sunday trying to register and vote, and they were denied. But supporters of Brian Patterson were coming in who didn't register in time, who didn't pay, who weren't even delegates, who didn't even live in the province the month prior. They just moved in because they were going to work there. People were voting more than once. So we had instances where people were voting more than once. The ballots were just photocopied on a piece of paper so you could duplicate them. And they didn't have a proper voting list. And at the end of the race, they wouldn't reconcile the ballots with who voted. So that's anyone who has done any kind of election scrutineering, that at the end of it, you have in a certain poll 100 votes, you match it up with the number of voters, right? And if you've only counted 100 voters, but you got 200 ballots, the thing is not legit. They could not reconcile the ballots with the voters, and they refused to do so. They refused now for 2 years. My lawyers asked them to hold on to the ballots, so they didn't do a motion to destroy the ballots, because I had my lawyer quickly send them a letter to the party lawyer in the middle of the voting, because I knew halfway through where this was going. And they quickly ran out and announced who the winner was before I could even get the totals. And I waited 2 days, and it was so obvious, Josh, that I had delegates calling me that night and the next morning saying that thing was rigged. What are you going to do about it? And I guess they counted on the fact that my wife was an MPP, that I wasn't going to say anything. And I think 2 days later, I blew the whistle when I got all the numbers in order. And it's a terrible thing to witness kind of voter fraud at such a grand scale, where it impacts people right across Ontario for a position like president of a political party in Canada. And it really irked me on the basis of the following. They were encouraging hundreds of people. They had like over 2,000, 3,000 people pay $400 or whatever. People were hard-earned money. We're paying $400 plus hotel room, plus transportation. You can imagine if you're coming from Thunder Bay down to Toronto, Etobicoke for a convention, or you're coming from Eastern Ontario, Glengarry, Prescott, Russell, or Cornwall, or Southwestern Ontario, Windsor, Niagara, all the way to Etobicoke for a 3-day weekend. And you're paying money and you think you're deciding the future of the Ontario PC party. And your vote doesn't count because the staff in charge rig it. After they've already been rigging local nominations for 2 years, after the police have investigated one in Hamilton, after we had a turnover of leader and Doug Ford elected because of all this stuff, they do it again. So that's when my eyes were open and I said, wow, I thought it was a Patrick Brown, Waleed Solomon problem. It's not. It's a
it's more of a progressive conservative. Sorry to cut you. I think I cut you off.
No, go, Josh. Go ahead.
So that was more or less the breaking point for you at that point. You see this level of rigging, and you just go, "This party is just not for me."
Did we conclude that this party wasn't for us? I
guess more or less, what was the breaking point if this was not?
So, when you go through something like that, it's how do I explain it? It's a bit jarring. Like, it takes you a little bit of time to clear your thoughts and figure out what's going on. And a lot of the gaslighting going on in the back was, well, it's just a problem with this guy. We would have never rigged it if it wasn't him, right? And my wife's an MPP, and it's early on in her time as an MPP. And there was important work ahead. For example, she was fighting a drug injection site in Cambridge. There were other issues that she was being very vocal about for Cambridge residents. And so we were caught in this moral dilemma of knowing that no one can reform the Ontario PC party from the staffers and the operatives, because the lobbyists and the operatives in charge control it. And if you're doing a grassroots anti-establishment movement, you cannot reform it. We're caught on the one hand on there. And on the other hand, we're caught with Belinda is the MPP for the riding of Cambridge, and she's in the government, and there are important issues that she's bringing forward to the government, and she wants to continue to bring those forward. So I said I got to get all the facts together, got my lawyer to get witness statements from all the scrutineers so we could get all our ducks in order. And we gave some time to the PC lawyer to, we gave them the benefit of the doubt, correspondence with our lawyer to their lawyer saying, hey, let's do a recount. Let's sit down lawyer to lawyer and look at the ballots. And this was going on for months, and they refused, and on and on and on. And you're trying to do the proper process, appeal it, whatever, internally, trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they don't know what's going on. And fast forward a year later, and we're not getting anywhere. They're not letting us look at the ballots. They're not interested in discussing what's going on. They're not interested in holding another convention. That's when I said enough is enough, and I sued them because they just won't budge on anything.
And this lawsuit is still ongoing. It hasn't reached
right.
a
Yeah, they won't file a defense. Unfortunately, so there's a couple of really important things that you should get down for your article. There are no laws in Ontario against voter fraud in internal party elections. There are laws for general elections.
Really?
So if the same thing happened at a general election, you could go report it to Elections Ontario. Federally, you could report it to Elections Canada. Internal party elections, there are no laws. So while we have all these laws, like election finance laws, micromanaging the reporting of every dollar you raise in the nomination campaign or a general election campaign, there are no laws on convention elections, leaderships, or nominations. And these are critical elections, right? Internally in a party, these are to be decided. So going to the police doesn't help you because they'll just say there's no laws on this outside of our jurisdiction. Going to Elections Ontario, they say we have no jurisdiction under the Elections Act for this. So when you end up suing over getting rigged out of a vote, legally, the lens is you got to sue for damages, because suing to overturn the vote is specific performance in the law. It's an area of law that's very, very tough, and courts are reluctant to get involved and micromanage the governance of a political party because they're considered private entities. So you can really only sue for damages, which is there was a contract. They let me enter the race. They signed off on my candidacy. I spent a bunch of money. I raised a bunch of money, and I got rigged out of it. And so that was the legal remedy that we asked for in the lawsuit. So that's the first thing. The second thing you should know is 2020, a few months after my lawsuit, my wife brings forward a private member's bill, her first as an MPP. No, not 2020, 2019, I think. You can look it up. And it called for applying the same laws on how elections were governed, are governed in general elections in Ontario, to applying them to nominations, leaderships, and conventions. So basically, if you commit voter fraud, there are laws against it. You can get fined or you can get punished. And she thought, this is a common sense bill. My government, they might not like it, but they'll vote in favor of it because you can't say you're against voter fraud. And a lot of MPPs in the PC caucus said they liked her bill initially when she drafted it and tabled it. But the Premier's office initially came out and said the Premier and Cabinet would be against the bill, which is just shocking. Like, how can you come out and say you're against a bill against voter fraud, to fight voter fraud? And second reading was 2 weeks after she tabled it. And they all, the legislature unanimously voted in favor of it. So the PCs had a reverse on it. They flipped on it from what they told the media, and they voted in favor of it. But what the House Leader, MPP Paul Calandra, said, because I went to that debate to back my wife up, was that if they're going to vote in favor of it, but when it goes to committee that's controlled by the PC government, they're going to have an opt-out. So the PCs could opt out of the legislation. So voter fraud rules wouldn't apply to them, which is just so ridiculous. So it goes to committee and they never bring it back forward. They never amend the bill. They never bring it up for a vote. They just park it at committee from 2019 all the way to 2021. And it doesn't come up for third reading. And in 2021, during the federal election, Doug Ford reset the legislature, he prorogued it, and the bill died, because when you reset and prorogue the legislature, all the bills at committee die. And my wife doesn't have any more private members' bills. At that point, we thought there was some hope when they unanimously approved the second reading of the bill. And we were thinking that we could just keep applying pressure and kind of fix democracy, and it'd be slowly. But the next thing that happened in between 2019 and 2021 is my wife voted against Doug Ford's lockdown bill,
the Reopening Ontario Act in 2020.
Right.
And then she ended up being removed from the PC caucus.
Right.
So
right.
I was going to ask you, take me through that moment. So what were you and Belinda feeling at the time, right after that? Because if I remember correctly, Doug Ford ended the session from July until September, right after the voting of that bill?
I have to check. I can't remember if the end of the session. It's a really good question. In 2020, there was the leadership race of the federal Conservative Party, and I ran for leader, and I was on pace to pass Aaron O'Toole and raise the $300,000 to get on the ballot. And they kicked me out of that race twice because the leadership campaign, the leadership election for the federal Conservative Party was run by a bunch of operatives from the PC party. They dominated the leadership committee. And 2 months after, I was kicked out of that race twice, fighting on an anti-establishment, anti-lobbyist, exit carbon tax, a campaign exposing the operatives in the back for what they did at the provincial level, and they were trying to take over the federal party. 2 months later is when Belinda voted against the lockdown bill. And so I was still getting everything together from my federal campaign for leader, and Belinda just could not in good conscience vote for Doug Ford's lockdown bill. She was the only current or former PC MPP to vote against it. Guys like Rick Nichols, guys like Roman Baber, they all voted in favor of it. Derek Sloan wasn't saying anything about it because he was too busy helping Aaron O'Toole in the federal leadership. And she just said, I'm going to vote against it. And she was concerned that she was going to get kicked out of caucus, but I said, that's ridiculous. They're not going to kick you out of caucus for one vote. Well, they did. They kicked her out of caucus. And after they kicked her out of caucus came the hardest 2 weeks of, despite all the things I just told you, two of the most difficult weeks in our life were those 2 weeks after they kicked her out of caucus.
What happened?
PC staff got on the phone with just good average, I shouldn't say average because they're spectacular human beings. They're not, operatives in the PC party. Belinda's riding association on the Cambridge PC party. There's 20 people. We had a full Cambridge PC riding association. All were supportive of Belinda's decision to vote against the bill, the dangers it brought forward to democracy. The PC staff just got on the phone and started threatening her riding association, saying, they explicitly said Belinda's done. She can't run again. Jim and Belinda should get off the Cambridge PC board. And these are democratically elected positions, right? We're not going to have a nomination where that Belinda can run in to represent the PC party in the next election. And if you guys spend $1, backing Belinda up from the money that Belinda raised for the riding association, we're going to sue you.
Who were some of the people that were, who were some of the people who were making these threats?
Staff at Cambridge at the PC headquarters. So they're regional organizer staff, directors. So there's executive director at the PC party and the number 2 man at the time with Gareth Nielsen. I haven't heard if he's still there. I think he is. So they had Gareth on the phone because Brian Patterson's a bit of a weasel. He won't get on the phone and do that himself. So he gets like an operative or a staffer to do it. And Brian Patterson's the president. There's an executive director at PC headquarters, and then there are directors. So one of them got on the phone and started threatening volunteers. They're just threatening volunteers. We're going to sue you personally. You're going to be personally liable. Under the law, that's called a duress, like compelling someone to do something under duress, under a false pretense that you have the legal right to sue them. Very dirty stuff. Very, very, very dirty stuff. So very stressful 2 weeks where people on our board were wanting to quit. We're very, very afraid, some of them, that they were going to get sued, that the government, the governing party was going to come after them for expressing their opinion. And so 2 weeks after Belinda got kicked out, 2-3 weeks, now this is where it comes full circle. The PC executive, led by the president who won from a rigged vote, calls a meeting of the executive. Derek Sloan's riding president on the federal level is on this executive. There's about 20 of them on the call or something. And they do a motion to boot me and Belinda and the entire Cambridge PC board right off their positions, right out. And they don't even follow their own constitution in terms of issuing a grievance against the riding, saying what constitutional rule we broke, citing their own constitution. They just have the meeting. They express a bunch of defamatory reasons why to justify, which were not true. And we get an email saying none of you are on the Cambridge riding anymore. And they send the paperwork to Elections Ontario saying, here's a new president, we're done. The new president at the time was actually one of the key figures on on Belinda's campaign locally, who him and his spouse turned on us, which was an interesting experience to realize you had someone that turned on you in your ranks. And so we were gone. And at that point in 2020, I think that's August now, we realized there's no reforming the Ontario PC party. It's over. Like, you can't do anything. You can't, as an MPP, vote the other way on a bill. You can't put forward a private member's bill without the approval of the premier's office or the leader. You can't democratically make change at a convention. You can't put your name forward in a nomination contest, even if you're a sitting MPP. The party politics in Ontario have been corrupted, and it's over. And we're seeing it now in other parties too, like the NDP. Just yesterday, Andrea Horwath announced that one of her longstanding MPPs in Hamilton, East Stony Creek, Paul Miller, he's not allowed to run. So there was no convention, there was no nomination, just the leader decided the guy's out after years of being an MPP. Wow, like what a destruction of the parliamentary system. These disputes are supposed to happen internally in party politics. That's when we realized in August of 2020, we went away for a couple of weeks, local, but away from our house, to give my wife a breather. And I said to her, "Are you done? Do you want to retire? Like, it's been enough. I'd understand if you're done." And she just got so much support from local Cambridge residents and people across Ontario who had supported us in the past, from Axe the Carbon Tax, Take Back Our PC Party, presidential campaign, federal leadership, and supporting her. People said, "You got to keep going. We need an option." Groups of pastors who had their churches locked down at the time had been speaking to her before she had voted against the lockdown bill and after, saying, we need someone to speak up. They were saying we need a new party. And she came back in, I think, September and made the decision she was going to finish her term. She was going to run again. And we had the discussion of, well, if you're going to run again, then we need to create a party brand, because running as an independent is tougher. And we have supporters across Ontario who are saying, we can't vote for you because we don't live in Cambridge. And that's when we filed in September the reservation of the name to see if we could use it at Elections Ontario for the New Blue Party of Ontario.
And I was just gonna jump on that. So at that point, the party was founded, it looks like October of 2020. It was officially registered with Elections Ontario in January of 2021. So take me through that process of what registering the party was like. What kind of effort did you put into it? How did you go about building your platform in order to make it succinctly different from the progressive conservatives?
So there's a couple of things. So there's a bit, there is work involved in registering a party, and then even more work after you actually get registered to become a real party, right? So there's a couple different things that people think about when they think about a political party. Number one, are you a political party recognized under the law by Elections Ontario? That's the first thing. And then the second thing, when they hear of there's a party, they believe a party to be local riding associations and candidates in every riding, and members and donors and that kind of thing. So the first step is getting registered at Elections Ontario. And how would I say this? It's not impossible to do so. Other provinces, it's harder, but it's not as straightforward as you might think. So when you read the law, it says you've got to submit the name of a party and get it reserved. So that's the first step. So we submitted the New Blue Party of Ontario in September, and we weren't sure if it was going to get approved, because it can't sound like any other political party, not just in Ontario, but across Canada. Elections Ontario, the law says they look at all parties. So you can't use Freedom, you can't use Conservative. There's another, we couldn't use PPC or People's Party. You can't call it the Conservative Party of Ontario or Libertarian Party. So we came up with New Blue, and it got approved very quickly, 2 weeks later. So, okay, great. Then you have to get over 1,000 signatures of Ontario voters to register the party. Before it's registered, it's nothing. It's just a reserved name. And we had such an overwhelming response. We got, double that in 2 weeks. I think Randy Hillier claimed he was going to register a party a few months ago, and he never got the 2,000 signatures. So whether he had trouble getting them or whether he decided he wasn't going to do it, I think, I know that the reason why he announced that was just to help the PCs out and undermine New Blue. But it is a struggle to get 2,000 signatures. Those folks that were leading that effort to help Randy register a party were sending multiple emails for signatures, and they weren't getting the response they wanted. We got an overwhelming response. So we submit the signatures in November of 2020, and it takes Elections Ontario at least 3 months to review them. They call and email people to confirm, the actual person who says that they signed. And they basically do an audit of the signatures you submit. So we got notice in January 2021, we were registered. And when you're registered, a couple of things happen. Number one, as soon as you're registered as a party, any dollar that you're spending, whether it's a mail distribution system or designing a logo or putting up a website, every dollar has to be reported in your financial return. So again, Elections Ontario has laws on how you spend money on political parties, but no laws on voter fraud. So we had to start raising money right away because, we got a website up, we got a logo, we're sending email blasts. That's all expenses of the party. And I can't pay for it out of my own pocket up until the threshold of the max donation. So we start raising money. And now comes the hard work, because there are parties registered at Elections Ontario that are paper parties, but they've got no members. They've got no riding associations. They don't have a constitution. They don't have, the guts of a party. So not the legal requirements, but the guts, kind of like what Derek Sloan's up to and some other parties like the Stop the Sex Ed Party. So there came the hard work. And at the same time in 2021, we're rapidly going as fast as we can to build this party. I had a tumor in my leg from bone cancer, the same thing that Terry Fox had. And I had to undergo 3 rounds of surgeries to spare my leg and save it. I got a full knee replacement, removed 80% of my femur, replaced with the internal prosthesis, lost 2 of my quads. So I'm bedridden for months, doing 6 rounds of chemo, 3 surgeries. And luckily, my wife is going to Queen's Park to hold the Ford government to account on mandates and lockdowns and the economy and social policy. Luckily, it wasn't just me and my wife. We got a solid team, the founding board of the New Blue. We had people on the ground, and we just started chipping away at it. We got our membership policy up, started selling memberships at the end of the year, got our constitution, mission statement, founding principles up. PPC still doesn't have a constitution, for example. They've been around for 3-4 years. And then we started registering riding associations. We're at 114 riding presidents registered now. And, so we're quite, we worked really hard in 2021, despite our health challenges, despite everything that they were throwing at Belinda in the legislature, banning her for 90 days. And, just different attacks and distractions, like Randy Hillier pretending he's going to start a party, Derek Sloan working for PC operatives, saying he's going to start a party or he's leading some paper party. So we got it to the point where when I started walking again at the end of 2021 and regaining my strength and getting back at it, where we were ready to start getting applications for candidates and start slotting in candidates in place and getting ready for the June 2nd election. So it's a tremendous amount of work. It's work to get it registered. Getting a couple thousand signatures is work. And it's tremendous amount of work building a party that actually has guts to it, a fully functioning party with governance structure and people on the ground in every riding. And we're not fully there yet. We still need 10 more candidates for a full slate. We still have riding associations where we need more people involved, but the longer we're around, we'll fill out the rest of the party.
Okay. And I just wanted to touch briefly, how is your cancer? Is it completely gone? I think you tweeted something recently that it was officially, like, you passed like a certain round of chemo.
Yeah, so I misspoke once, and I think on a radio interview I said cancer free. That's not the right expression, because when you have this type of bone cancer, it's all been removed, but I go for tests every 3 months to make sure there's some microscopic traces left behind in the bloodstream that haven't been cleared out. So the response to the chemotherapy was tremendous. It was the best category response they could have gotten. The doctor said they were shocked. So that's very positive. But I do go back for a test every 3 months to make sure it doesn't resurface. And I'll be doing that for, 5 years. So it's a jarring experience, but it really sets your head straight, and it really clarifies what's important in life. And I think before I had apprehension in terms of what I was supposed to do and what I was supposed to talk about. And after that struggle and that battle, we just my wife and I just lay it out all on the table, and we let people make the decision. And people cast judgment on you on politics, but we can't really control that. But it's important for us that we just move forward with our convictions, because there's more important things in life.
It's very, very true. And I am happy to hear that you are doing better.
Thanks, Josh.
So, and I just want to jump briefly just into what will the New Blue Party do for Ontario? And I actually have 2 voter questions here from people who have already said they will vote New Blue, but they wanted to hear from you directly. So just a straight up question. Why should people vote for the New Blue Party in June?
Okay. Oh, you're going to ask both now or just one? Okay. So
I'm going to ask my questions first, and then I'll jump to the voter questions at the very end. Just like a broad general. Some people may not, after this, they'll know a lot more about the New Blue. Yes, but just easy, open question. Why should people vote for the New Blue Party in June?
If you want to change the narrative, if you are concerned that the establishment political parties at Queen's Park, the PCs, the Liberals, the NDP are all on the same progressive bent, and it's not even like the PCs are doing it slowly anymore. They're just as aggressive on the left-wing stuff like the Liberals and the PCs. They all agree on the same policy. If you want to hold them to account on their shady backroom deals and their schemes, if you want to challenge the lobbyists who run the political process in Ontario, if you want a voice for Ontarians who've been shut out of the political process, if you want to defend places of worship, defend the taxpayer, defend families, defend parental rights, and fight for democracy and against corruption, your only option is the New Blue Party of Ontario in the next election. Because the PCs, they are not blue, they're not conservative, and they're not for you. They're not for Ontarians. And the New Blue Party is being built to stand up for Ontario voters and stand up on principle. That's what Belinda's been doing as the Cambridge MPP. That's what she's been doing in Queen's Park, not just on lockdowns and mandates. And we are putting together 124 candidates to win as many seats in the next elections as possible, because we cannot have a Queen's Park, Ontario legislature of PC, Liberal, and NDPs all agreeing on the same policy. And we had 15 years of Liberal government here, and the PC party is now just a wing of Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party of Canada. They agree with Liberal policy. They're implementing Liberal policy. And Ontario voters are sick of the betrayal, and they need a different option.
And what would some of the big major differences be between the New Blue Party of Ontario and other right-wing parties in the race, like the Progressive Conservatives? And I know you mentioned briefly that Hillier was running a People's Party in Ontario. I believe it's actually called the Populist Party of Ontario now, since he's dropped out. They're trying to do something, but they're essentially trying to run again. All these right-wing parties, what separates New Blue from all the rest?
So there really aren't all these right-wing parties. That's the impression that voters are being given from the establishment media, because they're trying to undermine New Blue and the operatives behind the back of the PC party. So, for example, Randy Hillier was was the first person that the idea of a new political party came out of my head that I discussed with before I even mentioned it to Belinda or our team. I went out for a drink with Randy Hillier, and in the course of the conversation, he said he didn't care anymore. He was an independent at the time. He was really in a bad state of mind. He was not championing against the lockdowns. And I kind of said, I'm worried, Randy, that Belinda's going to get kicked out of caucus. In 2020, this was like 2 weeks before she did get kicked out of caucus. Unfortunately, I misread Randy, and he went and told PC headquarters about our conversation. And I think it was a week later, 2 weeks later, they kicked Belinda out of caucus. So Randy doing the anti-lockdown activism and getting secret deals cut with the PCs to change the Election Act and get him taxpayer subsidies so he can fund his political operations, he was just doing that to undermine New Blue. And when he announced he was going to do something called the Ontario First Party, which I called the Ontario Last Party, he was doing that to undermine New Blue. And we were proven right on that because they never got that party registered, and he retired. He said he's not running again. So he's been in cahoots with PC operatives the whole time. We announced New Blue. And there's a staffer in the PPC who doesn't like our politics, and the PPC has a candidate by the name of Mark Emery, who's not a right of center politician in any sense.
He's a
Mark Emery
candidate in London North Center.
Yeah, and he was a guy that founded the marijuana party. And these guys in the PPC has an element of these like far left freedom types that are not very principled on the conservative principles. And they don't like, the positions that Belinda and I take. For example, they don't like that Belinda fights a drug injection site in Cambridge because these guys like Mark Emery want drugs legalized, I think. It's not enough just with marijuana. So they don't want to be part of New Blue. And some of these PPC staffers don't want PPC activists to get involved in New Blue. So they started with this idea they're going to do an Ontario First Party, and now they're pretending to do some other party, but that party's not registered, Josh. It's like what we said earlier. It's, you reserve a party name, you throw up a website, you say, oh yeah, it's a party. So it's irrelevant to the conversation. The other party that actually has more support at the time was a Libertarian Party of Ontario, and they've been around for a long time. We agree with some of their positions. They're good guys, good men and women there on their board, but they don't run candidates in every riding. And they've got some policies we agree with and others we don't. And so that's why we started New Blue rather than going with an existing party. And then there's Derek Sloan's phony party. So Derek Sloan, after the Randy Hillier experiment failed, the PC operatives came forward with that. Derek Sloan was convinced by PC operatives, not convinced because he's in on it. He finished his time in the federal leadership. He had a deal with Aaron O'Toole in that federal leadership. The Sloan team planted a saboteur on my leadership campaign to get me disqualified. And Derek Sloan was allowed to finish that race when I wasn't because he had a deal in place with O'Toole. And he spent that leadership never criticizing Aaron O'Toole for kicking me out of the race. And he spent most of his time attacking Leslyn Lewis for her PhD thesis and for past connections she had with left-wing organizations. And that's Derek Sloan's role, to exploit conservative and Christian voters, to get them to support him so he can drive the vote to establishment politicians. And he did that federally. And when he was done with that, he's come over to Ontario politics now from a stint in Alberta to do that with a new party. And the whole purpose of that party is to undermine New Blue. So behind the scenes, they have a whisper campaign going, saying terrible things about me and wishing me ill, and telling people they'll never work with us, and deceiving and withholding the fact that they actually are just doing it to protect the PC party and to raise money from conservative voters. But publicly, they're saying, oh, we went and started this party in December. And 3 or 4 months later, after they were pretending like they've never heard of the New Blue, they're saying, we want to work with the New Blue party. They don't want to work with us. They want us, after we announced we had 112 candidates, and including a candidate in Chatham, they've come forward to say they want us to withdraw or go back to these candidates who've spent weeks and months applying, paying the candidate fee. They want us to go back and tell our riding association presidents and our candidates not to run, because Derek Sloan claims he's going to run candidates in the next election. We don't know how many candidates he's going to run. Derek Sloan hasn't even said he's running in the next election. I suspect him and Rick Nichols are not going to run in the next election because they're controlled by PC operatives, or they might pick some ridings to run in where the PCs have no shot of losing, according to their polls, or no shot of winning. So, they're not really they're not going to be a force in May. There's not going to be any confusion because we're doing our best to get candidates in every riding. What they are doing in the meantime, though, is for those that follow politics closely, which tend to be the people that buy memberships and donate, they're creating confusion amongst political activists, right? So there's the general public of 14 million people, and most Ontarians don't buy memberships in a political party. I think the numbers are like 1% or something like that of people who hold a membership in a party. And And so Derek and his team and Rick Nichols are focusing on causing confusion amongst that 1%. And it's important, and it's putting at risk how successful the New Blue Party could be, because those are the people that donate and get involved and volunteer on the ground and put lawn signs up and knock on doors. And that 1% spreads the message to the other 99%, right? Who decide to vote in May when the election campaign is. So that's their tactic, to cause confusion amongst the conservative movement. It's effective in the sense that I've got to answer these questions to you, right? And it allows the media, the establishment media, to create stories out of nothing, because they're a paper party. They don't have members. They don't have riding associations. They say things. They promise things that are very appealing to a certain voter, knowing that they're never going to have to back them up. So, for example, the entire premise of Derek Sloan and Rick Nichols' movement, supposedly, is to oppose, is parental rights and to fix the education system. But on the one bill that's come forward on education to infuse critical race theory, Rick Nichols voted in favor of it. And he claimed after he didn't understand the bill. Well, I don't believe that. He knew what he was voting for. But even if you take him at face value that he didn't understand it, you're not really doing much of a political party when your party consists of a leader and an MPP, and they can't even get on the same page on the one bill that your party exists about, education and critical race theory. So they're just causing confusion amongst donors and activists in the conservative movement. And we've had to address it. We've explained it. And we're going to move forward and get candidates in place in every riding. And come May, that person that asked the question won't be confused.
Okay. And I know you were just briefly touching on Derek Sloan and this party. And I was going to quickly transition to a voter question, because that was actually his question. Why does competing against smaller, similar-minded parties and dividing, and I'm quoting him, by the way, similar-minded parties and dividing up the common sense and anti-mandate restrictions vote appear to be what New Blue is doing? Because, and he quotes the Derek Sloan tweeting out this week that New Blue isn't honoring a non-compete pact with the Ontario Party.
Yeah, so I think that question from your voter should be addressed to Derek Sloan, because we've been building this party for 18 months. And Derek Sloan never wanted to meet. His co-conspirators never wanted to have a meeting. They pretended in September and October and November we were going to have a meeting, and they canceled the meetings. There's a video that we just put out this morning that you can, on the morning of March 18th, that you can look at for more information. So that question is better asked of Derek Sloan, because for 18 months, we've been building the New Blue Party. And only after we announced there's 112 candidates in place did Derek Sloan come forward and say that he wants us to pull candidates back to sabotage our efforts. And so he's going to have to ask, your voter is going to have to ask Derek Sloan why he's doing this. I know why he's doing it. And the New Blue Party board knows why he's doing it, for the same reason he attacked Leslyn Lewis in the leadership. He's doing it to help the Ontario PC Party survive. He wants to sabotage our effort. There is nothing more that we can do, nothing better we can do than making sure we run a candidate in every riding. So we have a common front of the New Blue Party into the election. And we're not going to fall for sabotage efforts by people like Derek Sloan, who make a career out of sabotaging and exploiting conservative voters. And I hope your voter that asked the question doesn't get fooled by them either. But I feel really bad for the people who've donated money to Derek Sloan. He raised money in the federal leadership on the promise that he was going to fight. He never criticized Aaron O'Toole very much for disqualifying me from the race. He spent all his time attacking fellow Christian Leslyn Lewis. After that, he raised money saying he was going to start a federal party based in Alberta. Never started that party, never registered that party. And again, promises made, promises not kept, commitments made, commitments not kept. And now he's got this provincial paper party with no members, no riding associations, claiming that he's going to fight Doug Ford. He's putting up a good fight, raised over $100,000, maybe a couple hundred, maybe $250,000 at this point from his devoted followers. He's not committed to running. He told the media he has no plans to run. Maybe he'll change his mind. And he's admitted that he's not going to run a candidate in every riding. I don't know how you're going to fight Doug Ford and the PC government without a candidate in every riding. He's got a deal cut with a party called the Stop the Sex Ed Party. Stop the Sex Ed Party is controlled by PC operatives. Their leader doesn't campaign. Their leader doesn't run elections. It's a fundraising vehicle for advocacy. Good for them. They're allowed to do that, I guess, under the law. It's a little shady that they do that, but that's up to their opinion. So Derek Sloan has a deal with that party saying if they run 5 candidates, he's not going to run candidates there. And after we've put forward a year and a half of fighting through cancer, setting up a political party, getting 112 candidates in place, he wants us to back down and not put a full fight against Doug Ford's PC party. And we are against and reject backroom deals and secret deals. So I actually, Josh, I'm thankful that Derek Sloan put that tweet out, because he's proved to us that he's all about secret backroom deals and the New Blue Party is not. He's made it very clear to Ontario voters, the New Blue Party doesn't accept secret backroom deals to thwart democracy, and that's how Derek Sloan operates.
Okay, and just for riding purposes, you mentioned that you have, as of right now, you have 112 riding associations. Your wife, Belinda, is running again in Cambridge, and you as leader, what riding will you be representing? If you two
Kitchener-Conestoga. I'm running in Kitchener-Conestoga right next door.
Really?
Cambridge.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm actually from Kitchener-Conestoga. So.
There you go. Hopefully we can earn your support.
Okay. And I know you mentioned in other press conferences that in other interviews that vote splitting is not happening. Can you elaborate a little bit on how vote splitting is not happening? Because I know there's a lot of people that will vote PC Conservative. There were people who will vote for New Blue, and there's people who will vote for like Ontario Party, Populist Party, what have you.
I'm not seeing that people are voting for the Populist Party. I'm seeing a very, very small pocket of people that are donating to the Derek Sloan Party. The vote splitting is happening with the establishment parties. So the PCs, Liberals, and NDP are all fighting over the same vote. The PC party has made a conscious decision to target the Liberal base. They want to be the new Liberal Party in Ontario. That's why they are on the same page with Justin Trudeau on everything, going after truckers and protesters, shutting down trucking businesses, backing Trudeau up on everything he does, and putting in emergency measures provincially before Trudeau, and the same, fiscal policies as Trudeau, same social policies. So that's where the vote is being split. And on the anti-establishment, defend the taxpayer side of the issue and put the lobbyists in check and fight voter fraud, if you're an Ontario voter and you care about those things, there's no one to support. And, it's a misconception. This vote splitting idea is being pushed by PC operatives to protect the PC party. I don't see the vote splitting. The people that have signed up to support New Blue, if we're not on the ballot, they're not voting next election. And the thousands of people across Ontario that support New Blue, they like our message. And they want a political party, a comprehensive option that's going to fight against the lobbyists, fight against voter fraud, fight against the corruption of the political process, fight for lower taxes, a balanced budget, against Doug Ford's carbon tax, against high hydro rates and the wind turbines that are ripping off ratepayers, against critical race theory, against the woke activism in our schools and institutions, and to ban these vaccine passports. We're offering a comprehensive option, and no one else really is.
And I just have one more question for you, and it's from a voter, and she's identifying herself as a Waterloo Region nurse. So how will New Blue deal with the failed healthcare system? Will you take down Bill 124 and pay nurses what they are worth? We haven't had a proper raise in over 10 years, and nurses are leaving in droves.
So the first thing is we got to help. It's part of our platform, the New Blueprint. There's a section on healthcare, one of our core commitments, 6 core commitments. We've got to reduce the backlog of procedures. We've got to help those nurses who lost their jobs because of mandates get their jobs back. And that will help cut down this backlog of procedures and the wait times that are just ridiculous because of the failed experiment from the Ford PCs. We've got to expand early treatment of COVID because people are losing loved ones because early treatment's not available while this government mandates vaccines and coerces Ontarians. And that's our healthcare platform, and you'll look out for it when we reveal the new blueprint. Nurses have been doing great work. And the more that we run our economy into the ground, which is what the Ford PCs are doing after the McGuinty win Liberals, and the more we run an economy that's growing at just over 1%, and nurses are not going to get a raise because we can't afford it. We need an economy that's growing at 4 and 5%. That's what we need. We need an economy where the revenue is keeping pace with an aging population. We need an economy where we fight and tackle productivity, because our productivity is lagging with other jurisdictions in North America and around the world. And we need a growing economy to help support healthcare services. That's what's critical, and that's what's going on. And the reason why our healthcare system continually is being squeezed is because the PCs and the Liberals for 2 decades now have destroyed our economy, and revenues are not keeping pace with healthcare costs. And we need to provide options in healthcare to clear the backlog.
All right, and I think that's all I have. I'll leave the floor up to you if you had any last comments or questions you had for me.
No, this is great, Josh, and it's good timing because I forgot to put in my charging cord for the laptop, so we're down to 12%. But I'll just say thanks for the opportunity and the good questions. And to anyone who watches, democracy is broken in Ontario. It can't make change internally in the existing parties, and the New Blue Party is created to restore hope and prosperity and opportunity in Ontario. And the best is yet to come. As dark as things seem for a lot of people, oftentimes it will only get worse. And if we don't do something about it, so newblueontario.com is where you can get involved. And also we have a petition against critical race theory, stopwoke.ca. You can check it out, and please sign. And that's it for now. And thank you, Josh, for your time.
Yep, no worries. Thank you.